morning, September 11th, 2002, 1 year after the worst terrorist attack in history. The World Trade Center, the Pentagon, a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It was a day that began like any other and ended in horror and disbelief. This will be a day of solemn ceremony, a time to grieve the losses, a time to honor the heroes, a time to remember what happened 1 year ago today, Wednesday, September the 11th, 2002.
From NBC News, this is a special edition of Today, America Remembers, with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer.
And welcome to Today on this sad and somber Wednesday morning. I'm Katie Couric at what is now known and will be forever as Ground Zero. This was once a shining symbol of America's spirit, ambition, and ingenuity. The shining towers of the Twin Towers here at the World Trade Center, but now it is a 16-acre scar, and the healing process for thousands of families and the entire nation is far from over.
And I'm Matt Lauer, uptown in Studio 1A. The attack on America took this country by surprise. By now, the images have grown familiar, but the idea of it, a coordinated assault, 4 airliners hijacked and turned into missiles innocent Americans used to attack other Americans, is still quite stunning. 1 year ago, the events were already unfolding. By 7:02, Mohammed Atta, the leader of the hijackers, was on board a U.S. Airways flight from Maine to Boston. He spent that entire flight praying. Today, we remember what the terrorists wrought. At Ground Zero, where the names of the victims will be read aloud. At the Pentagon, where President Bush will honor those lost. And in Pennsylvania, where they'll pay tribute to the heroes of Flight 93. Today, we will hear from our leaders and some ordinary Americans who were moved to extraordinary acts. From the White House, where the president will observe a moment of silence to mark the time that the first plane hit the first tower, to our fighting men and women in Afghanistan who are taking part in Operation Enduring Freedom. Katie.
Matt, meanwhile, families are beginning to gather here, not only families, but representatives as well from the NYPD, the FDNY, the Port Authority. Bagpipers marching from each of the 5 boroughs will be arriving here at Ground Zero. Some of them left as early as midnight last night. This clearly will be a day of remembrance, resilience, and resolve. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, as you know, the federal government raised the nation's terror alert warning to its second highest level, which is called Code Orange, signaling a high risk of attack. NBC's Justice correspondent Pete Williams is at FBI headquarters with more on this. Pete, good morning.
Katie, good morning to you. There were several factors that led the government to do this. First, a captured al-Qaeda operative in Southeast Asia warned of multiple simultaneous attacks on U.S. interests overseas and said al-Qaeda cells had been gathering explosives for car bombs to do this since January of this year. Then another source warned of possible suicide attacks on U.S. interests in the Middle East. Intelligence analysts also worried that low-level al-Qaeda operatives might try to stage individualized, undirected attacks of their own. And then intelligence analysts also noted that the kind of intelligence traffic that they follow looked very similar to the pattern of intelligence traffic that led up to September 11th. Put that all together, add an additional concern that officials thought, well, if there's all this, perhaps there's other parts of it that we don't know about that might target the United States, and they decided to increase the threat level. But so far, the only specific and credible reports they have of possible attacks are on interests overseas, and that's why the State Department has closed 14 embassies. U.S. military forces are on their highest state of alert in the Middle East, short of war. There is extra security around the world at installations, Katie.
All right, Pete Williams. Pete, thank you very much. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg planned and will lead the ceremony here at Ground Zero this morning. Mr. Mayor, good morning to you. You know, as you set out to plan this event, this very important event really for so many people and the entire nation, what was your major goal?
Well, I thought we had 2 things to do. One was to look back and remember those 2,800 people that were lost and understand why they were lost and tell the world that story. And the other thing is to look forward and tell the world that we are in the process of rebuilding, and New York and America and freedom will wind out better than it was a year ago.
How involved were the families in the planning of the ceremony?
Some some just didn't want to get involved at all. We tried to outreach to as many different groups as we could. And in the end, you take a little bit of everybody's ideas and you blend them together and come up with something.
There will be a citywide moment of silence at 8:46, the time the first plane hit the North Tower. There will be some very moving silences, frankly, during this ceremony, but you made the decision not to have any original speeches. The Gettysburg Address will be read, the Declaration of Independence. Later, you're going to be reading the Four Freedoms, written by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Why that decision? Because some people might say, Mr. Mayor, you know, we need words to help us heal. We need relevant words to put this into context and give us some understanding.
I think that the attack on the World Trade Center was an attack on freedom-loving people around the world. And what better than the basis on which this country was formed, the Declaration of Independence, the most tragic period in our history, our Civil War remembrance, or World War II, which really was a defining moment, and FDR took us out of the Depression. The president will, as the leader of the country and really of the free world, will tonight give a speech taking us forward. And I thought it was appropriate for him to do that and us to pull together America in the morning.
Meanwhile, the nation, including New York City, are under a code orange alert, which is the second to the highest, a state of high alert. Obviously, New Yorkers are nervous today. How can you assure them that all the proper precautions have been taken?
New York has been under code orange for the whole year. We never reduced our standard of readiness after the attack a year ago.
So it hasn't been enhanced at all for the one-year anniversary?
Well, we obviously have more police officers both on the street where you see them and where you do not see them, and are taking extra precautions on 9/11. But we have the world's best police department. We've been training extensively for this, and I think from an individual point of view, what we should do as human beings, hug our loved ones one more time before we leave in the morning, a little extra kiss and squeeze. Take some time at 8:46 to remember those we left behind. Light a candle tonight. Exercise some common sense. If you see something strange, call 911. But leave security to the professionals. I'm very comfortable with that.
All right. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as always. Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for talking with us. Good luck today. I know it's going to be a difficult day for everyone. Now, here's Matt.
All right, Katie, thank you. Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani led New York through the darkest day in its history and, of course, the aftermath. Mayor Giuliani, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
Let me start by first expressing my condolences to you and your family. I know your mother passed away a few days ago. How's your family doing?
My family is doing all right. I mean, she had a long life, almost 93 years. We buried her yesterday, and you can't help but compare it to all of those people who lost loved ones in the midst of their life, and so we have a lot to be very thankful for.
Well, again, our condolences. It's been a year
since
the unthinkable happened in this city, Mr. Mayor. What are your thoughts on this morning?
My thoughts are that the city is here, very much like the thoughts I had when I woke up on the morning of September 12th after about 45 minutes sleep. The city is here. It is very strong. It's going to have to endure this pain, because it is a tremendous amount of pain, because we know the people that we lost on the way in here this morning. I saw a man who lost his son, and we hugged. But we're stronger for it. We're stronger for it because we survived it, and we understand how important the things we're fighting for are.
You know, there's going to come a time this morning, Mayor Giuliani, where you'll take part in this ceremony at Ground Zero, and you'll begin to read the names of the people who were lost on that day. Do you expect that to be a very difficult time for you?
Yeah, I have expected for some time this to be a very difficult day. And I guess, like many people, I'm hoping, that we're over it and we're into tomorrow, but it's a necessary day. It's a day in which we remember the awesome bravery of the people who displayed more bravery in the face of evil than I've ever seen before, who conducted the very best rescue operation in the history of this country, saving over 25,000 people. I'll never forget, Matt, when I first came down here that morning, and I went to the fire department command post, and things were falling down around us. And then we had to face what happened. If you had asked me how many people we would have lost, it could easily have been 3 or 4 times more.
I think you said that day, you said the number of dead will be more than any of us can bear.
Yeah, well, it was more than we could bear, but at the time we thought it was even more. And the reason that it wasn't as high as it could have been is because these brave people saved so many people, saved over 20 or 25,000 people. And in the weeks after that, we recognized that. And somehow, you know, as time moves away, we don't realize the most horrible, horrific attack in the history of this country, the worst losses we've ever sustained, and the bravest response on the part of uniformed services and other people that we've ever witnessed in any 4, 5, 6 hour period.
You know, as I get back to you reading the names of those who died, there's a good chance you'll be reading the names of people whose funerals you attended.
Yeah, names that I've either knew or then got to know in the months after that. You know, when I was at my mother's funeral yesterday, I was there with Governor Pataki and the former police commissioner, fire commissioner, head of emergency services, Governor Carey, and we remarked how we've spent a year being at funerals together. And but it gave us strength. Every one of those funerals gave me strength. It gave me the determination, you know, to move on with life, and to remain committed to the absolute goal of ending global terrorism.
And on this morning, is there one message you'd like to convey to the families who lost loved ones on that terrible day?
We love them. They share this loss, you know, with so many people that maybe that can give them some sense of solace and strength, and the pride they should feel. Even feeling the loss and with the tears in their eyes, the pride they should feel about the remarkable heroism of these people who turned the worst attack in America into one of our greatest days and to a day of great patriotism.
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, again, our thoughts are with your family on this day.
Thank you.
As the city of New York and the nation get ready to mark this somber day, we want to take a moment to look back at the chilling events as they unfolded 1 year ago today. The 11th day of September 2001. Surveillance cameras at the airport in Portland, Maine caught these images of the hijackers.
American Airlines flight number 11 from Boston's Logan Airport, scheduled to go to LAX. It left at 8 a.m. this morning. We have a report the plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey.
American Flight 77, a 757 with 64 aboard. Back in Boston, United Flight 175 with 65 aboard.
Al, it is such a pretty morning, isn't it?
Perfect fall morning here.
It is the West Twin Tower. Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision.
A second airplane, a 727, just ran into the building.
Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
There was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon.
They are now confirming that it does appear that at the Pentagon it was a plane.
The FAA has banned all takeoffs at all airports across America.
The building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
These pictures are beyond belief.
We now have an AP News alert out of Pittsburgh, the crash of a large plane just north of the airport.
The other tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed.
There's been a declaration of war by terrorists in the United States.
We need all of the open space we can get to evacuate people from the World Trade Center.
Spent a year in combat. Never saw anything like this. Nothing this devastating.
Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status.
A third damaged building, the 40-story World Trade Center number 7, also crashes to the ground.
I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice.
America has been attacked and it has been changed.
September 11th, 2001. We now want to check in with our correspondents stationed across the country. Jim Miklaszewski is at his post at the Pentagon, as he was 1 year ago today. Robert Hager is at Reagan National Airport. Brian Williams is covering Homeland Security, and Kelly O'Donnell is in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Mick, let's start with you.
Katie, there are several indications today that the war in Afghanistan, indeed the war on terrorism, is far from over. In Afghanistan today, 9,500 U.S. troops. That's the largest number of American troops in Afghanistan since last October, when the war began. Now, the war took a terrible toll on the U.S. military. 51 dead, 19 of those killed in actual combat. There were thousands of enemy forces killed, but only just a handful of the top leaders of either al-Qaeda or Taliban captured, and the #1 target, Osama bin Laden, remains elusive today. And if you really want a good sign of where the war on terrorism stands today, U.S. military forces throughout the Persian Gulf, Southwest Asia, and the Middle East are at the highest state of alert this morning, just short of war. And there's one more telling sign right here in Washington, D.C. Just 100 yards from where I sit right now, a live anti-aircraft missile battery guards Washington, D.C. Katie?
Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon. Mick, thank you very much. Of course, we'll have the memorial ceremony live there a little bit later, as well as the remarks by President Bush. Meanwhile, after the attacks of September 11th, air traffic in the United States was grounded, and the airline industry has yet to recover. NBC's Robert Hager is at Reagan National Airport with more on that aspect of the story. Bob, good morning.
Morning, Katie. Well, you can really see that here this morning because the crowd is very, very light. There's almost no wait at all in the ticket line there behind me. The morning shuttles have gone out from this airport to New York and Boston, half empty. And that's what's expected at airports across the country this morning. A lot of travelers wary already about traveling this day, and even more wary with that new alert. All the airlines have canceled a lot of flights today. I know U.S. Air told me they'd canceled more than 100. Among all the airlines, about 13% fewer flights nationwide than on a normal Wednesday this time of year. Advanced reservations today down 22%, says the online booking site Orbitz. Security heightened some because of yesterday's alert. For instance, even more of those air marshals are flying today. The force is 100% deployed. We've got military exercises here in Washington and in New York that put fighter planes in the air once again, and there are some flying restrictions as those memorial services go on today. A different sort of travel day 1 year after that horrible day a year ago. Katie?
Bob Hager at Reagan National Airport. Bob, thanks so much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the morning. Meanwhile, NBC's Brian Williams is covering Homeland Security. He joins us from MSNBC headquarters with more on that. Brian, good morning.
Good morning to you, Katie. And despite this new elevated threat level, which included, by the way, the rather chilling admonition from the feds that families across the country should talk about this day, its significance as an event, even know how to contact each other throughout the day, it appears the business of this Wednesday morning goes on. We're going to take advantage of some software called Flight Explorer, vis-a-vis what Bob Hager just reported, and take a look at where the various commercial aircraft are located. Every dot represents a plane in the sky over the United States right now. And while this is not the volume you would see on an average Wednesday, this pattern is very familiar. Most of the dots on the East Coast there are the 6 and 7 a.m. departures, most of them headed west, and we will start to see the area around O'Hare come to life and the area outside LAX come to life as the morning goes on. Schedules reduced about 13% officially, but remembering that all the major East Coast landmarks are being protected by either missiles or F-15s or F-16s aloft, it's still a good amount of business in the skies over the United States. Katie will check in on it through the day.
All right, Brian Williams. Brian, thank you so much. In Somerset County, Pennsylvania, 40 people were killed when United Flight 93 plunged into a field after a desperate struggle. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is there as family members and friends mark this day. Kelly, good morning.
Good morning, Katie. Shanksville shares this anniversary with New York and Washington, but things here have always been different. For example, President Bush will make his very first visit to the site today. He and the First Lady will visit the Shanksville site and will place a wreath here before about 500 family members who are gathered just a short distance away. They are the family members of the 40 passengers and crew who were involved in that heroic struggle. Also different about Shanksville, unlike New York, unlike the Pentagon, this place was never a target. It has been described as a battleground that became a cemetery. Also, unlike the Pentagon, where rebuilding has already taken place, and unlike New York, where there is so much debate over what to do with the site, here in Shanksville there is very little debate. They believe this land will remain a hallowed ground. Plans for a permanent memorial are underway, but the place where the crash took place will remain just as it is today, a peaceful field. Katie?
All right, Kelly O'Donnell in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Kelly, thank you very much. Now let's go back to Studio 1A, to the news desk, where Ann Curry has a look at the other news of this day. Ann, good morning.
Good morning, Katie, and thank you. Good morning, everybody. In other...
Byron Pitts, live with us here at Ground Zero. Jane?
All right, Dan, thank you. 184 people died at the Pentagon last year when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the nation's military headquarters. CBS News correspondent Thalia Ashores is at the Pentagon with a look back at that terrible day seen through the eyes of those who survived it. Thalia, good morning.
Well, good morning to you, Jane. Of those who died, 125 perished simply because they came to work in the area of the Pentagon you see right behind me. That's where American Airlines Flight 77 hit. But there were hundreds more who survived, and some of them shared their memories with us of that horrible day.
I've never been to hell, but that was enough for me that day.
It was like being in a kiln. It was just cooking and cooking and cooking.
The miracle of surviving the initial blast and not being instantly killed, it's a miracle.
Purgatory and salvation, both in a matter of hours, scarred and strengthened the Pentagon and many of its people that day.
I was blown off my feet into the pylon. It was like
right here?
Yeah, just like some hand, just invisible hand, just pushed me.
Sergeant Major Tony Rose had no idea a jetliner had just slashed diagonally through his second-floor workspace, an area still under reconstruction today.
The fluorescent lights are blowing, wires are dangling. Of course, we're sucking up smoke.
He couldn't see or stand, could barely breathe in the smoke, but he knew what he had to do, get people out.
When we came out of this room, we were low crawling, elbows and knees. And then by the time we worked into the smoke in the hallway, we were literally on the floor slithering.
A floor below, the first team of local firefighters was wading into the disaster zone, Captain Michael Smith leading.
We were feeling tremendous amounts of heat, a lot of anxiety about the whole situation, and but mostly almost a sense of loss, because everywhere we started to look, we had to lift up sections of wall and look under. We were finding no one.
But there were survivors trapped elsewhere along Flight 77's deadly path.
We heard people in the rubble, so we started helping them by digging a tunnel. And this man's hand grabbed me by the wrist, and we pulled some debris off his face, and he looked me right in the eye, and I said, "You're going to be all right. The help's here." He was scared to death.
In another part of the building, 30-year-old Navy Lieutenant Kevin Shafer was engulfed by the explosion.
My whole body was doused in jet fuel.
Still wrapped in burn garments today.
I ingested the jet fuel into my lungs, and then immediately thereafter, everything exploded, and I was set ablaze.
Of 30 people in his office, he was the sole survivor, crawling out through a hole blasted by the airplane-turned missile.
The next memory I have is a vision of, I'll call him my angel, because to me he was very angel-like that day.
Hey, brother. What's going on, man? What's going on, brother?
Army Sergeant Steve Workman, frantically looking for survivors, had found none until stumbling upon Shafer.
His hands were covered with blood, and his arms were just, the skin was just literally hanging off of his arms. He looked at me, and you could tell that he was scared, and obviously badly burnt, and he said, "Please don't let me die." And, you know, when he made contact with me eye to eye and said that, it wasn't going to happen.
Workman would not leave Kevin Shafer's side, riding with him to the hospital.
I felt that we had made this bond.
It took a team of doctors to save Shafer.
They were trying to tug and pull these rings off my fingers. I heard the doctor call out for the ring cutters. And I yelled out, "Stop, stop." And they froze, and I was able to focus all my will and strength that I had and take off my wedding band. And I took off my class ring. And I handed them safely to someone standing by. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm done. Now you can save my life.
But firefighters couldn't save the stricken portion of the Pentagon.
I was just like, this is our Pentagon. I mean, you know, what's going on? I mean, this is our country. I felt very angry at that point too, you know, that we were sucker punched.
As the day wore on, the rescue efforts became instead a grim search for body parts.
I picked up a child's hand, that was all, just a hand. And that's when I got angry to wonder why someone could do this. You can come after me, I'm a soldier. I've sworn to protect and defend. But that wasn't right.
But over the past year, each of these men has worked hard to make other things right, taking strength from their experiences.
I've healed so much in this past year. Steve is the brother that I never had, and he never had a little brother, and I'm his little brother, and we love each other like brothers now.
A lot of things have changed for me in my life that I just used to take for granted. Tell your loved ones on a day-to-day basis that you love them. That's very important.
A couple of other notes as people gather here for the ceremonies. You can hear music behind me. Let me just tell you that Sergeant Workman received the Soldier's Medal for his actions. Sergeant Major Tony Rose pulled 7 sailors out of the rubble. He received the Purple Heart and the Soldier's Medal. As for Kevin Shafer, he really just can't wait to get those rings back on his fingers and begin a family with his wife Blanca. And Jane, he will be here in about half an hour or so, and you can ask Kevin Shafer more about his plans.
He does have quite a story. Thalia Assuris, thanks so much. And the ceremony at the Pentagon, including a speech by President Bush, gets underway just over an hour from now. And now here's Dan.
And Jane, with a reminder, our viewers will, of course, be carrying that line. America's military leaders have nearly 8,000 U.S. troops still in Afghanistan, hunting down what's left of the al-Qaeda network. The soldiers will take time out later today to mark the 9/11 anniversary with a flag ceremony and prayers. CBS News correspondent Lara Logan is at the old, dilapidated, what was dilapidated Soviet air base, now a combined U.S.-Afghan air base at Bagram, just north of Kabul. Lara?
Well, Dan, this is probably the last place that most of these soldiers here expected to be a year ago today. And I can tell you it's a tough assignment. The conditions here are not easy, but all of the soldiers we've spoken to agree that it is an honor to be here.
The mood in Bagram this morning was somber. The Americans here may be far from home, but the anniversary of September 11th weighed heavily on their minds. This group of soldiers couldn't wait for the official afternoon ceremony. They got up at dawn to hold their own private prayers. Paratrooper Henry Rodriguez almost lost his father-in-law. He escaped from a building next to the second tower as it collapsed.
Right now I'm happy that I'm here because I'm defending, saying my country, my nation, and my family.
People here were determined the day would pass as normal because they didn't want the terrorists to feel like they're winning. Jennico Nance admitted doing that was hard.
I cried a little bit, about, family members that, lost wives, husbands, and children. And I just, thank God that, my dad and my family are still alive.
Fortunately for her, she's not alone here. Her father is a specialist in the same unit.
Basically, I really thought about the soldiers that I thought that couldn't handle it, There are some here can handle it and some can't, and the ones that are stronger have to be strong for those who can't handle it.
In just a few minutes, Stan, a moment of silence will be observed here right across the base, and everything will come to a complete standstill. That's to mark the exact moment that first plane struck the World Trade Center, and it is, of course, a moment that no one here will ever forget. Dan?
Lara Logan, reporting live from Afghanistan, the Bagram Air Force Base. A reminder that, as someone once wrote, war is long hours of tedium and tension punctuated by danger. These September 11th attacks have changed so much about our world and how we live our daily lives. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Shafer is on Capitol Hill this morning. Bob?
Good morning, Dan. Well, this will be a very sober day here at the Capitol. I think all the flags here went to half-staff at 12:01 this morning. They'll remain so. There will be a moment of silence at noon today, and then a quiet ceremony on the Capitol steps about 5:30.
There's tons of people in the streets. There are papers, things fluttering out. I can't see any evidence of what it was that could have crashed. All I can see is just this massive, gaping hole with tons of black smoke falling out of the building.
All we can do is stare aghast at these pictures at this point. You are looking at the north building of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. These are coming to you live now. Debris raining down from 110 floors up. As you can see, this is a clear blue sky day in Manhattan. If this was an accident, it would be a needle in a haystack kind of accident. There was another one. We just saw another one. We just saw another one apparently go. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks. We just saw on live television as a second plane flew into the second tower of the World Trade Center. Now, given what has been going on around the world, some of the key suspects come to mind. Osama bin Laden. Who knows what? Eric Shawn is with us. Eric, I know you have a lot of sources at the FBI and other agencies like that. What can you tell us?
Well, first, I apologize for being out of breath because I was walking down Fifth Avenue, which is close to our studios, and I heard a jet, perhaps a 737 or a small Airbus, flying low, unusually low over Fifth Avenue, making a right. I'm not going to say, I don't know, I don't have any reports on what type of plane hit the World Trade Center, but people looked up and it made a right toward the building.
Nice and orderly, nice and
orderly. It is a tragedy. It is abhorrent. It is disgusting. But
I'm, wondering, are these pilots terrorists themselves? Are there terrorists in the cockpit who are holding guns to a pilot's head? Did they
I can't imagine.
You can speculate completely about how this happens, because obviously it takes a lot of training and expertise to fly a complicated, sophisticated aircraft, whether it's a Boeing 737 or a smaller Airbus. These are not little Cessnas and little Pipers. So there is you have to wonder and raise what possibility there is with the type of scenario that was going on in the cockpit.
Our Wendell Goler is at the White House, make that Sarasota. He is traveling with the president. Wendell Goler, what's the reaction from the president?
John, the president is here promoting a reading initiative on the second day of a two-day trip to Florida. He just finished reading to some children at the Emma Booker Elementary School and was asked about the incident. He said he was aware of it and that he would have something to say about it later.
Let's bring in David Lee Miller, our correspondent. He has an eyewitness with him. David Lee, what can you tell us?
Good morning, John. I'm a few blocks from the World Trade Center right now. As you would expect, all the roadways are pretty much cut off. The only way to get near the buildings is on foot right now. The scene is absolutely a horrific one. You have people streaming out of the area. You've got people literally in tears and shock. People that just work in the nearby buildings that cannot believe what has happened. Still, many of them remember the terrorist attack years ago on the World Trade Center, and many of them, this is just an ugly reminder of that, although the details of what happened here are not certain. As I was walking downtown in Lower Manhattan, making my way to the World Trade Centers, I stopped to speak to Sylvia Fuentes. She's with me right now. We're a few blocks away from the building. She works in Lower Manhattan. She used to work in the Trade Center, and I'm going to actually hand her the telephone right now, and she's going to describe for us what she saw this morning as she was arriving at work. Sylvia?
I heard a loud rumbling, and when I walked out of the deli onto Fulton Street, I looked up in the air. There was an airplane actually going into the World Trade Center, and flames were coming out, and smoke was just billowing in the air, and tons of people were running down Fulton Street, just running each other over, and I made my way back to my office on Water Street, and when I got upstairs, I looked out my window to see what was going on, and the Second World Trade Center just went into flames, just from 1 minute to the next.
Sylvia, thanks for that eyewitness report. When we saw that second plane slam into the second tower intentionally, quite clearly, you got to believe this is a terrorist attack. Harvey Kushner is on the line with us. He's a frequent guest of ours and a terrorism expert. Harvey, is it too early to speculate about suspects?
One thinks only that this could be the most horrifically planned incident, you know, in the annals of terrorism against the United States. Think about it. I mean, you look outside the Fox studios, look how clear it is. I mean, how could you miss the trade towers? I mean, not just one, but two planes?
Well, and it brings to mind, you know, everybody hates those metal detectors at airports, and everybody makes passing through them almost a joke these days. But clearly, it seems that something is going to change if you can make this kind of a statement and kill as many people as are likely to be dead in this kind of scenario.
Yeah, you know, John, you know, we're talking about terrorism. No matter how this turns out, this is going to be a day that's going to live in infamy. And, you know, it's going to cause changes in terms of, if it turns out that terrorism in terms of security like this country has never seen before.
President Bush is about to speak. He's in Florida. That was what was supposed to be a joyous event at an elementary school. Let's listen in.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
We are going to be looking at an enormous death toll. 50,000 people work in those two buildings. Rita Cosby is on the phone with us, and Rita, I understand you have a lot of new information.
Yeah, John, I have just been told from a U.S. law enforcement official that they are saying it is evident that this is a terrorist-related attack. And among the key targets, key people that they're looking at is Osama bin Laden. It was just last Friday that the U.S. State Department put out a worldwide caution to American citizens traveling abroad and also to U.S. government facilities. And they said that terrorism knows no limits, whether it's on U.S. soil or outside. So they're certainly looking at that as a possibility. What I'm also hearing from my officials at FAA, at the Federal Aviation Administration, is that they believe the first plane may have been an American Airlines plane, a commercial jet, either a 737 or 757, and that it was a hijacked plane. This is what they believe. They're still trying to get this verified, but they did get some reports that there was an American Airlines plane that was hijacked en route from Boston to Los Angeles this morning. And they're saying that there is a strong possibility that that first plane that crashed into one of the towers, which does appear to be commercial, and looking at the video, they're saying appears to be either a 737 or 757, that apparently might have been the hijacked plane.
Sergeant Churchill on here.
John Fund from the Wall Street Journal is on the phone with us. John, were you in the area when the planes hit?
I was across the street in my office building.
What did you see? What did you hear?
I heard an incredible sonic boom, and looked up, and there were already much smoke and flames pouring out of the building. And about 15 minutes later, of course, the second sonic boom, which of course would have been the second tower and the second plane.
What about injuries, John?
Well,
Can you tell us?
The most terrible and heartrending thing about this is, about 15 minutes ago, bodies started dropping from the top floors of the tower closest to the highway, about at least 5 or 6, and it was absolutely terrible. Obviously, they had two choices: to be burned in flames or to leap and end it all. It was quite tragic.
Let me bring into the conversation David Asman, my colleague.
Yes, John Scott,
David, what can you tell us?
I just want to give you some late-breaking information. Perhaps one of the things that is of greatest fear is that there is yet another terrorist attack, since those two plane crashes happened within 20 minutes of each other. Well, all of Manhattan has been sealed off. This is probably unprecedented. Of course, all of this is unprecedented in this dastardly occasion, but Manhattan has been sealed off. The Hudson River bridges and the tunnels have been sealed. Clearly, there is an attempt right now to thwart any further act of terrorism, act of violence against the people of Manhattan. So Manhattan is in a lockdown. We are hearing right now of another explosion that has taken place at the Pentagon. We have the heart of the financial district of America being attacked. Now we understand that there is an explosion, there has been an explosion in the Pentagon, the heart of the military command center of the United States of America, John. It can't get much worse than this, let's hope.
You gotta believe that it has happened again. Another large airliner, perhaps hijacked, perhaps part of some widespread plan, apparently slamming into at least the area around the Pentagon. They have not struck at America. They have struck at some individual places in America, but this country will go on. I want to go to our Washington managing editor, Britt Hume, who has the outlook from the nation's capital. Britt, this raises all kinds of questions about America's response, and I guess that response is not going to be immediate, is it?
Well, whether it is immediate or not, the one thing I think we are seeing, John, is this series of evacuations from various buildings around Washington. And I think it's important to say that we don't know and have no reason to believe that the White House, for example, was facing any immediate or imminent threat. The same is true on Capitol Hill, where it appears they will be evacuating the building up here soon. Nothing has happened at either of those places. This, of course, though, John, I think this is one of these days where we can say that things will not again be the same in the United States of America. This is the kind of terrorist attack that is the nightmare that experts and others have warned about, but some of us may have thought really could not happen on such a scale. This is quite remarkable.
As we watch these pictures, the World Trade Center, 110 stories, literally starting to fall.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. I had to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator?
We was inside the building.
You were inside the World Trade Center?
Inside the building.
Doing what?
Getting ready to go upstairs to search, and the floor gave way. The whole building collapsed on us.
How did you guys get out?
Just found our way out, struggled our way through.
Walk towards the light.
Walk towards the light.
We walk towards the light. That's all we did.
Hello?
Yeah, David Lee, what can you tell us?
John, the scene is horrific. One of the two towers literally collapsed. I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer, was questioning me about my press credentials. We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us. There was debris falling, I'd say, at least 3/4 the height of the building. People within the entire perimeter began literally, including myself, which is why I'm out of breath, to run for our lives.
Those steel girders, strong as they are, had a lot of weight to support, and apparently, I'm not a structural engineer, but I'm just guessing now that they gave way. The loss of life here is going to be enormous.
May God help those who are there, and the victims and their families, and all the souls that are lost today.
Can you tell me what you saw, what you heard? You all right?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Look at this guy. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This poor woman. Wow.
United 93, Cleveland, do you still hear the center? United 93, do you still hear Cleveland? United 93, United 93, do you hear Cleveland?
80 miles southwest of Pittsburgh, this United Airlines Flight 93 crashed.
From the size of the impact crater, it would appear as though the angle of descent or angle of attack had to be nearly straight in.
I think the pilot downed the plane in a remote area because, you know, there wasn't very many houses over there where it went down. And I don't know, it's really, the whole thing is just unbelievable.
This is clearly a national catastrophe. There will be some response from the White House. Let's go to Wendell Goler, who was traveling with the president in Sarasota, Florida, and find out what the latest is there. Wendell?
John, the president left Sarasota, Florida. Air Force One took off just a short while ago to convene a meeting of his national security advisors, including the vice president, the heads of the CIA, the National Security Agency, and the FBI, and also New York Governor Pataki. After the two attacks on the Twin Towers in New York, he was briefed by his national security advisor, Condoleezza Rice, who phoned him after the first attack. Mr. Bush was actually reading to some children when the second attack occurred. Chief of Staff Andy Card interrupted him, told him about the attack. It was clear at that point we were dealing with terrorists.
I want to bring into the conversation General Al Haig, the former Secretary of State. General Haig, at a time like this, how does America respond prudently, with the proper amount of caution, and yet with whatever force needs to be applied?
Well, first we have to know the full limits of this tragedy, and it's unprecedented, of course. But we have to stay, above all, united and calm and ready to take resolute action, which sometimes we have failed to do in the recent past, when the perpetrators are uncovered. And we have many, many indicators of precisely who they are. This was too broadly based a terrorist act to be just a few crazies. This is a terrorist movement, and we know where they're located today. And obviously, as a nation, we're going to have to take action against them.
Oh, there it goes, there it goes, there it goes, there it goes. Oh, when it comes downward. All right. We do need to put it down now. I think we need to put it down now. Here we go.
America, offer a prayer. One year ago today, as they memorialize in New York, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Washington, the whole nation, the whole world, we are back in studio with Detective Dave Fitzpatrick, who was there on the day and the days and weeks and months following. Dave, as we look to the future, we look to our children.
September 11th, a day that changed our nation. United by tragedy, Americans persevered. Today, 1 year later, we remember the heroes, the victims, and the loved ones left behind. WTWO News Channel 2 presents A Community Remembers.
And welcome to a special edition of your local news right here on News Channel 2. I'm Tom McClanahan.
And I'm Kathy Dash. We are thousands of miles away from Ground Zero, but during the last year, the Wabash Valley has been touched in many ways by the tragedies of September 11th.
And during the next 90 minutes, you'll meet some of the people whose lives have changed forever, obviously. Firefighters, Red Cross volunteers, and even Terre Haute's mayor, who was in Washington, D.C. when the Pentagon was attacked.
You'll see the new skills and equipment that our local police now have. And don't forget, a special local business that will forever be remembered for its part in rebuilding the Pentagon.
We'll take you inside the Newport Chemical Depot in Vermilion County, and you'll also learn how News Channel 2 is now part of our nation's homeland security.
This day has been filled with ceremonies, and there are still more scheduled for this evening. We'll recap what's happened today and what's yet to come tonight as a community remembers. We start now our coverage with a look at what's happened nationally.
And there's been a lot going on around America today. Victims of 9/11 were remembered today at the World Trade Center in New York City, in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the site of the plane crash, and at the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C.
Just about everyone that you can recognize has been a part of one of those ceremonies.
Absolutely.
President Bush took to the air throughout the whole course of the day just to prove that it's safe to be in the skies as well.
That's true. And we have team coverage tonight from all three of the locations that we have been talking about. We begin with NBC's Steve Handelsman at the Pentagon.
Good afternoon. As President Bush now continues to help walk us through a difficult day here at the Pentagon in Pennsylvania and now up in New York City. He's striking twin themes, heartbreaking remembrance, but also steely military resolve, especially on this hallowed ground. President Bush went to the west wall of the Pentagon, rebuilt since 9/11 by patriotic hard hats working overtime. In the big audience were relatives of the 184 who were murdered here.
And though they died in tragedy, they did not die in vain.
200 American troops attended the solemn ceremony. Many soldiers have been in Afghanistan since October, when the war on terrorism began. Just this week, the U.S. military deployed artillery to Afghanistan for the first time, giving ground forces the ability to counter rocket attacks by al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters. The U.S. military currently has more than 8,000 troops in Afghanistan, and officials say it's been slow going but successful.
And while troops remain there in Afghanistan, former Vice President Dan Quayle says the U.S. must remain on the offensive. He believes the U.S. will be attacked again.
We have to be vigilant. We have to realize that this war against international terrorism is a war. They have declared war on us. They have attacked us. They have killed Americans. And they will be back.
Quayle says he and his wife were in Arizona on September 11th. He says he heard about the attacks from his son, then began watching the events unfold on television. Terre Haute Mayor Judy Anderson and 9 other community leaders were in Washington, D.C. on that fateful day when the attacks happened.
They were scheduled to return home on September 11th, but as we now know, all air flights were canceled that day. Our city leaders experienced history firsthand.
Mayor Judy Anderson is at our downtown bureau on Ohio Street and joins us now to talk about her experience that day. Judy, remind us why you were there.
Well, we're having some audio problems, so we hope to join her in a few moments to talk more about that trip. But anyway, Washington...
So rebuilding the Pentagon was big for those folks over in Ellettsville. Rebuilding our audio connection now with our downtown bureau, and it's where Mayor Judy Anderson is, who was in Washington, D.C. last year, the delegation locally. Judy, why don't you remind us, why were you in the Capitol in the first place?
Well, basically, we were there to talk to the prison officials about the second and third prison in our community. We had met with Senator Lugar. We had met with all the prison officials. And we were having breakfast, getting ready to go over to across the street to the White House to meet with Senator Bayh. And so that's when everything broke loose, and we didn't even realize, I guess because we were so close to the situation, we thought it was an accident while we were sitting there enjoying our breakfast. and it was soon afterwards we realized that it was the terrorist attack. And sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and many times we felt like that while we were there.
Well, Mayor Anderson, we've seen all of the images on TV over and over again, but what was it like to see that and experience it firsthand?
Well, one thing, you know that the security works in the Capitol, because immediately our hotel was blocked off with yellow tape. The police, the Secret Service, everybody was out in force. There were guns everywhere. There was absolutely no traffic, absolutely no sounds at all. It was very quiet, like a ghost town. When we were not even allowed to cross the street to go to the small chapel that was across the street. And when they tell you, no, stay in the hotel, you do exactly what they tell you to do in Washington, D.C.
Mayor, it's been a year now since that happened. Do you feel like September 11th has changed you personally in any way?
Well, I still have not been brave enough to read the special editions of the newspaper there. I've got those by my bed, and it's been a year, and I haven't been strong enough yet to read those accounts of everything that happened. I think, if anything, it makes you more reflective, more thankful, more appreciative. I make sure I kiss my husband goodbye every day, because you never know what tomorrow brings for you.
Mayor Anderson, thank you very much for joining us during our special show.
Thank you.
The way we feel...
Chaos. That's the best way to describe the scene emergency workers were dealing with, and 1 year ago today, many lessons were learned. Welcome back. Emergency workers from hundreds of different agencies had to work side by side, but their communication wasn't so great.
A lot has improved, of course, in the last year since 9/11 for emergency workers everywhere. News Channel 2's Kit Werby joins us live now with more on Terre Haute's new and improved radio system. Kit?
That's right. New York firefighters and police officers learned 1 year ago today just how vital communication can be in times of disaster, and the city of Terre Haute took notice. September 11th, 2001. Failed radio communications may have doomed scores of New York City firefighters as desperate evacuation orders went unheard.
I'm just listening to what you're saying.
This is what is coming over our radio. Get out of the area. The second tower is coming down.
They tell you the second tower is coming down?
Yes, it's about to collapse.
A year later, very little has changed.
No, we've made improvements, but we're not nearly where we should be.
From one disaster to the next, plane crashes, fires, and now terrorism. Outdated communication systems and dangerously overcrowded emergency radio frequencies are hampering rescue efforts, and experts say will again.
Radios are going to be an issue again, and your technology shouldn't be an issue.
The city of Terre Haute agrees and actually saw the need for better communications 2 years before 9/11. The terrorist attacks only highlighted the need.
September 11th put, if you will, an urgency kind of under our seat, saying, hey, we've got to do something now.
And they did, with the help of the Oakley Foundation and existing monies in the police and fire budgets. The new 800 megahertz radio system is now a reality, and it's universal amongst all fire, police, ambulance, and emergency management office personnel. Where the old radio system had only one channel, the new system can be expanded up to 132 channels, all with a central dispatch, and it means better communication.
If a disaster should happen here tomorrow, tonight, today, we right now have a radio system in place that can handle the load and put everybody in communication.
Terre Haute also learned to spread out its resources, a lesson New York learned too late, with most of their communication towers at the center of the attacks.
You know, I'm not going to put all my apples in one cart, if you will. I'm going to spread it out and make sure that we have a backup for a backup for a backup, and that's what's important.
Terre Haute firefighters and police officers welcome their new radios, remembering what can happen when the communication dies. The new radio system was funded without any additional taxpayer dollars, and the Assistant Chief of Police said the price tag was well worth the public safety. Back to you.
All right, Kit, thanks a lot for reporting on that. Another change that...
Welcome back. The community of Sullivan is commemorating the anniversary of September 11th through reflection and prayer.
News Channel 2's Jenny Runovich is live outside the Sullivan County Courthouse down in Sullivan with more on the human prayer chain down there, Jenny.
Well, Tom and Kathy, one of the main ways people have been dealing with this tragedy is through prayer and reflection. Everyone seems to have turned inward, and there's been a renewed sense of faith as people pray for those who had died in the terrorist attacks and pray for the strength of our nation. And that's exactly why people are gathered here tonight at the Sullivan County Courthouse. The program just began. There was an opening prayer, and now they're singing patriotic songs. And pretty soon there's going to be what's called a human prayer chain, where they link arms and go around the courthouse. And joining me now is Kathy Croft with the JCs. And Kathy, you organized this event. Tell me a little bit about what's going to happen with the human prayer chain.
Well, we hope to have enough people to go all the way around the square to join in prayer. We'll probably pray before we dismiss the people to make sure that everyone hears. And we just want to show the community in the Wabash Valley that as a town we are united in our sympathy for the loss, and we just want to show our remembrance and have a memorial in this manner.
And many people, I'm sure, pray in their homes and have really reflected today. Why is it important to get together and bring everyone together in prayer?
I just think it's important to do it in public also, to show that we are not ashamed to pray and that we do need the Lord in these times.
And you also did this last year. Do you feel that it brings you closer to each other and the community?
Oh yes, I think so, because we all joined hands and we reflected and we heard some songs and some music, and we're just all here in the same spirit, so it's really nice.
And you think you'll get all the way around this year?
Well, we're hoping.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kathy.
Thank you.
And of course, you can still come out here in Sullivan. They are having the Corn Festival going on right now. That's why you see a lot of the tents and carnival rides around here. But the main theme right now is prayer.